The morning started like any other, until the sky turned dark with alien ships. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon and watched through the viewport as hundreds of massive black vessels appeared above Earth. The ships were bigger than anything humans had ever built, and they moved with deadly grace through space. Each one looked like a giant spear pointed at the heart of humanity. Jake had been in the military for 15 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. His hands shook as he reached for the communication panel. The bridge crew around him worked in tense silence, and their faces showed the fear that everyone felt. Lieutenant Sam Parker checked the radar screens and counted more ships appearing every minute. The alien fleet kept growing until it blocked out the sun over major cities around the world. Down on Earth, Captain Lisa Rodriguez sat in the emergency command center deep underground. The room buzzed with activity as officers ran between computer stations and phones rang constantly. Every screen showed the same terrifying sight of alien warships taking positions above New York, London, Tokyo, and dozens of other cities. Lisa had trained for many different disasters, but an alien invasion was not one of them. The aliens made their move exactly 3 hours after arriving. A deep voice spoke in perfect English from every radio and television on Earth. The words came from Admiral Zethkar of the Korthik Empire, and his message was simple and cold. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender completely, or every city on Earth would be destroyed. There would be no negotiations and no second chances. To prove they were serious, the aliens destroyed 3 military satellites with bright green beams that lit up the sky. The satellites simply vanished in flashes of light and debris. Jake watched from his ship as the pieces fell toward Earth like burning stars. The demonstration sent a clear message that human technology was no match for alien weapons. President Martha Stevens called an emergency meeting with world leaders while news stations broadcast non-stop coverage of the invasion. Reporter Kevin Walsh stood outside the White House and described the panic spreading through Washington. People ran through the streets carrying suitcases and backpacks as they tried to escape the city. Cars filled the highways and traffic moved. At a Kroll, Dr. Amanda Price worked in a small laboratory at the Pentagon and studied the alien communications with growing interest. She was a xenobiologist who had spent years wondering if humans were alone in the universe. Now she had her answer, but it was not what she had hoped for. The aliens spoke with confidence and seemed to know exactly how humans would react to their threats. Something about the alien broadcasts bothered Amanda, but she could not figure out what it was. The Korthiks talked about human behavior like they had studied it before. They mentioned fear and panic as if they expected these reactions and wanted to see them happen. Amanda made notes about the strange patterns in their speech and wondered if the aliens were conducting some kind of experiment. General Ryan Cooper gathered his top officers in a secure briefing room and discussed their limited options. The alien ships carried weapons that could destroy entire cities, and Earth's military forces seemed helpless against them. Fighter jets could not reach the alien ships in orbit, and missiles would probably be shot down before reaching their targets. The situation looked hopeless from every angle. The general ordered all military units to prepare for the worst while trying to look calm and confident. Inside, he felt the same terror that gripped everyone else on the planet. The aliens had chosen their timing perfectly and caught humanity completely off guard. There had been no warning and no time to prepare any kind of defense. Colonel Steve Barnes supervised the evacuation of Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. Soldiers loaded trucks with equipment and supplies while trying to look organized. Steve noticed that some of the evacuation orders seemed strange and did not match normal emergency procedures. Certain equipment was being moved to unusual locations instead of standard safe zones. He filed the observation away and focused on following his orders. Around the world, similar scenes played out as governments struggled to respond to the crisis. Military bases went on high alert while civilian authorities tried to maintain order in the cities. The alien deadline gave everyone less than 3 days to decide the fate of humanity. Most people believed that surrender was the only option that would save lives. The Korthik Admiral Zethkar observed human activities from his flagship and felt satisfied with what he saw. The humans were reacting exactly as expected with fear and confusion. Their military forces looked weak and disorganized while their civilians fled in panic. This conquest would be easier than most of the others his people had completed. Zethkar had conquered 12 different worlds for the Korthek Empire, and he knew the patterns well. Most species collapsed quickly when faced with overwhelming force and the promise of total destruction. Humans appeared to be following the same predictable path toward surrender. Their technology was primitive and their resolve seemed fragile. Back on the UES, Horizon Jake Morrison received new orders to retreat to a safe distance from Earth. The command made sense from a tactical standpoint, but it felt like abandonment. Jake looked at his crew and saw the same conflict in their eyes. They were military officers sworn to protect Earth, but they could not fight an enemy this powerful. As the first day of the alien ultimatum ended, humanity seemed to be breaking apart under pressure. News reports showed empty government buildings and abandoned military positions. World leaders made desperate speeches calling for calm while secretly preparing for the worst. The alien fleet remained in position above the major cities like a sword hanging over the planet. Dr. Price continued her analysis of the alien communications late into the night. She found more strange patterns that suggested the Kortheks were studying human responses very carefully. Their threats seemed designed to produce specific reactions rather than simply to intimidate. Amanda began to suspect that this invasion was about more than just conquest, but she needed more time to understand what the aliens really wanted. The second day brought more signs of human collapse as military units continued their retreats and civilians fled the cities in growing numbers. The alien deadline was approaching fast, and surrender seemed like the only choice that would save humanity from total destruction. The second day of the alien ultimatum brought complete chaos to Earth. Commander Jake Morrison watched from the UES horizon as military bases across the planet went dark one by one. Radio communications filled with panicked reports of soldiers abandoning their posts and officers fleeing with their families. The organized retreat from the first day had turned into what looked like total military collapse. Captain Lisa Rodriguez sat in the underground command center and coordinated the emergency response as best she could. Her screens showed disturbing images from around the world. In Washington, D.C., soldiers were seen running from the Pentagon carrying personal belongings. Tank crews in Germany left their vehicles on the side of roads and disappeared into the countryside. Naval ships in harbors sat empty as their crews fled to find their loved ones. The civilian population reacted even worse than the military. News reporter Kevin Walsh broadcast live from Times Square, where thousands of people pushed and fought to get out of the city. Store windows were broken and cars were abandoned in the middle of streets. Police sirens wailed constantly, but many officers had also left their posts to protect their own families. The normal order of society was breaking down everywhere. General Ryan Cooper held what appeared to be his final press conference from a bunker deep beneath the Pentagon. His uniform looked wrinkled, and his face showed the strain of the past 2 days. He spoke slowly, and his voice cracked as he told the world that Earth's military forces were completely inadequate against the alien threat. The general admitted that human weapons could not even reach the alien ships, let alone damage them. Cooper explained that conventional military strategy was useless against an enemy with such advanced technology. Earth fighter jets were like paper airplanes compared to the alien warships. Nuclear weapons would only destroy human cities while leaving the aliens safe in orbit. The general's words painted a picture of complete hopelessness that spread despair around the world. President Martha Stevens prepared for what everyone expected to be a surrender speech. She sat in the Oval Office surrounded by empty chairs where her advisors should have been. Most of the government had already evacuated to secret locations or simply fled. The president looked tired and defeated as she reviewed her notes for the televised address that would seal humanity's fate. The alien Admiral Zethkar monitored human communications with growing satisfaction. His analysis teams reported that human resistance was crumbling even faster than predicted. The Korthek Empire had faced stronger opposition from primitive species on other worlds. Humans seemed to be exceptionally weak when faced with superior force. Colonel Steve Barnes received orders to evacuate his remaining personnel from Peterson Air Force Base. The base had been mostly empty since the first day, but now even the skeleton crew was leaving. Steve noticed that the evacuation routes his men were taking seemed unusually specific. Instead of heading to the nearest safe zones, they were moving toward coordinates that made no tactical sense. Dr. Amanda Price continued her analysis of alien communications from her laboratory in the Pentagon. The building was mostly empty now, but she had stayed behind to finish her work. The Korthik broadcasts showed patterns that bothered her more each day. The aliens seemed almost excited about human panic rather than simply satisfied with their military advantage around the world. The same scenes repeated in every major city. London's streets filled with abandoned cars as people fled on foot. Tokyo's normally efficient transportation system collapsed under the weight of millions trying to escape. Moscow's Red Square stood empty except for scattered belongings left behind by fleeing crowds. Every government was preparing to surrender or had already stopped functioning. The alien deadline was now less than 24 hours away, and surrender seemed like the only option. World leaders who had not already fled made desperate attempts to contact the Korthik fleet. They offered complete submission in exchange for mercy, but received no response. The aliens seemed content to wait for the full 72 hours to pass. President Stevens finally appeared on television for her address to the nation. She sat behind the presidential desk, but her hands shook as she held her prepared speech. Her voice trembled as she spoke about humanity's complete helplessness against the alien threat. She described the military collapse and the failure of every defensive plan that had been considered. The president's words seemed to confirm what everyone already knew. Earth had no choice but to surrender completely and hope for alien mercy. She spoke about the courage it would take to accept defeat and the importance of survival over pride. Her speech was broadcast around the world and translated into every major language. Admiral Zethkar watched the human surrender speech with approval. The president's obvious fear and desperation confirmed that the conquest was proceeding perfectly. He sent reports to the Korthak High Command describing human weakness and recommending that the occupation begin immediately after the deadline passed. This would be one of the easiest victories in Korthik history. Colonel Barnes gathered his remaining men for what appeared to be a final briefing before they abandoned the base completely. The soldiers looked defeated and scared as they prepared to leave their posts. But Barnes noticed something strange about the evacuation orders again. Certain equipment was being moved to locations that seemed random, but were actually positioned around the alien ships in a rough pattern. Dr. Price made a discovery that changed everything she thought she knew about the situation. Hidden in the panic communications, she found coded messages that suggested the military collapse was not as complete as it appeared. Certain units were reporting their positions using outdated call signs that had specific meanings. The pattern was subtle, but it was definitely there. The final hours before the deadline brought scenes of complete human surrender. Military commanders broadcast their acceptance of defeat while civilian leaders begged for alien mercy. Television stations showed empty government buildings and abandoned defense installations. The organized resistance that had lasted 2 days was apparently over. Jake Morrison received his final orders to retreat beyond the orbit of Mars. His ship was one of the last human vessels still in Earth's vicinity, and the command made tactical sense. There was no point in losing the ship along with everything else when the aliens took control. Jake ordered his crew to prepare for departure while taking one last look at their home planet. The alien fleet maintained its positions above Earth's major cities and waited for the deadline to pass. The Korthik warriors were confident that the occupation would be simple since human resistance had already collapsed. Admiral Zethkar prepared his victory speech for the High Command while his troops made ready to land and claim their new conquest. Dr. Amanda Price stared at her computer screen in disbelief as the truth slowly became clear. The panic and chaos she had been watching for 2 days was too perfect and too organized. Real panic was messy and unpredictable, but the human evacuation Patterns followed hidden mathematical sequences. People were fleeing in directions that made no sense for escaping the cities but perfect sense for military positioning. She pulled up satellite images of the evacuation routes and traced them on her map. The fleeing crowds were not randomly running away from danger, but moving to specific coordinates around each alien ship. The pattern was subtle enough that the aliens would never notice it, but clear enough that Amanda could see the design. Millions of people were being positioned like pieces on a chessboard. Commander Jake Morrison received an encrypted message on a frequency that was supposed to be destroyed when the military collapsed. The signal came from deep space and used codes that only a few people on Earth knew. Jake read the message 3 times before he understood what it meant. The retreat of human forces was not a real retreat, but part of something much bigger than anyone had imagined. The message told Jake that Operation Trojan Horse had been planned for months in secret. A small group of military leaders and scientists had detected alien scout ships long before the main fleet arrived. They had used that time to create the most elaborate deception in human history. Every act of panic and every military retreat was carefully planned to make the aliens overconfident. Captain Lisa Rodriguez sat in her command center and watched the real communications network come online. Hidden beneath the public panic were secure channels that connected military units across the globe. The soldiers who appeared to be fleeing were actually moving to predetermined positions. The equipment that seemed abandoned was being relocated to secret staging areas. Lisa pulled up the actual status reports from around the world and felt amazed by what she saw. Underground tunnels connected major cities and held weapons that had been built specifically to fight the alien technology. Subway systems had been converted into launch platforms, while sewers held communication networks that the aliens could not detect. The preparation was incredible. Colonel Steve Barnes finally received the full briefing about his real mission. His evacuation was not an escape, but a careful positioning of forces around the alien ships. The equipment his men had. The moving was not random supplies, but specialized weapons designed to target alien weak points. Every truck that left the base was part of a coordinated attack plan. Steve looked at the detailed maps and target assignments with growing excitement. The human military had not collapsed at all, but had instead spread out into a perfect attack formation. Fighter jets were hidden in mountain caves while tanks waited in underground garages. Naval ships had moved to positions where they could support the land assault. Everything was ready, General Ryan. Cooper's defeat speech had been completely fake, and his real headquarters was still fully operational. The general sat in a war room deep beneath the Pentagon and coordinated the final preparations with commanders around the world. His public display of hopelessness was designed to make the aliens relax their guard while human forces got into position. Cooper explained to his staff that the deception required perfect timing and complete commitment from everyone involved. Military personnel had to act genuinely defeated while secretly following complex movement orders. Civilians had to flee in panic while unknowingly positioning themselves to support the military operation. The coordination required was unlike anything attempted before. President Martha Stevens met with the secret leadership council that had planned Operation Trojan Horse. Her surrender speech had been part of the deception, and her real message would come after the trap was sprung. The president reviewed the attack plans and marveled at the scope of preparation that had gone into the operation. The plan required the aliens to position their ships exactly where human forces wanted them. By appearing weak and defenseless, humanity had convinced the Cortex to spread their fleet over populated areas for maximum intimidation effect. The alien ships were now perfectly positioned for coordinated attacks from multiple directions at once. Dr. Price discovered that her communications analysis had been expected and encouraged. The research team wanted her to find the hidden patterns because it meant the deception was working exactly as planned. The aliens were so focused on human panic that they missed the real signals flowing beneath the surface. Chaos. Admiral Zethkar reviewed the human surrender with satisfaction and ordered his fleet to take lower orbital positions for the occupation. The Cortex ships moved closer to Earth to demonstrate their complete dominance over the defeated human population. This positioning put them exactly where the human attack plan needed them to be. The alien commander felt confident that the conquest was essentially complete. Human resistance had collapsed faster than any species the Cortex had encountered before. The occupation would be simple, and the integration of Earth into the Empire would begin immediately after the deadline passed. Zethkar prepared victory reports for the High Command. Jake Morrison's ship received orders to move to attack position Alpha 7 along with dozens of other vessels that had appeared to retreat. The human fleet had not fled the solar system, but had instead positioned itself for a coordinated strike on alien command ships. Every ship was equipped with weapons designed specifically to penetrate Cortec. Armored underground facilities around the world began their final preparations as the 72-hour deadline approached. Missile silos that appeared abandoned were actually fully operational and loaded with specialized warheads. Communication centers that looked destroyed were coordinating the largest military operation in human history. The deception had worked beyond the planners' wildest expectations. The aliens had positioned themselves perfectly while lowering their defenses and spreading their forces thin. Human military units were in ideal attack positions, while the Cortex believed they faced no organized resistance at all. Technical. Sergeant Carol Johnson worked in a communications center that the aliens thought was destroyed. Her team maintained contact with hidden forces around the globe while monitoring alien communications for any sign that the deception had been discovered. The alien chatter remained confident and dismissive of human capabilities. As the final hours before the deadline ticked away, human forces made their last preparations for the trap to spring. Weapon systems came online in locations the aliens had never bothered to scan. Attack plans were distributed to units that were supposed to no longer exist. The greatest deception in military history was about to be revealed. The Cortec fleet maintained its positions above Earth cities and prepared for the simple occupation of a defeated planet. Admiral Deathcar had no idea that millions of humans were positioned beneath his ships and waiting for the signal to attack. The trap was set and ready to spring. At exactly 73 hours and 1 minute after the alien ultimatum, the trap was sprung. Lieutenant Commander Dan Foster pressed the activation button in his hidden command post beneath New York City and watched as the subway tunnels erupted. With weapons fire, missiles streaked upward through concealed launch tubes while energy cannons emerged from fake building facades. The abandoned city suddenly came alive with deadly force. Similar attacks began simultaneously around the globe, as human forces revealed themselves from their hidden positions. In London, the Thames riverbed opened to reveal submarine missile platforms while Big Ben transformed into a communications tower coordinating the assault. Tokyo's bullet train tunnels became rocket launch systems as the city's underground network unleashed its hidden arsenal against the alien ships above. Admiral Zethkar felt his flagship shake under the impact of human weapons and could not believe what was happening. The defeated planet was attacking with coordination and firepower that should not have existed. His ship's defensive system screamed warnings as missiles struck from directions that his sensors had never monitored. The humans had been planning this moment for months. Captain Lisa Rodriguez coordinated the global assault from her real command center, which was far larger and more advanced than the aliens had ever suspected. Her screen showed successful strikes on alien vessels from every continent as human forces executed their carefully planned attack. The deception had worked perfectly and the enemy was caught completely off guard. Commander Jake Morrison led the space assault as human ships appeared from behind asteroids and space debris where they had been hiding for weeks. The alien fleet had spread itself thin over Earth's surface and left their flanks completely exposed to attack. Jake's weapons locked onto the nearest Cortec cruiser and fired the specialized rounds that human engineers had designed specifically to penetrate alien armor. General Ryan Cooper emerged from his secret war room and took direct command of the operation he had spent months planning. His earlier surrender speech was forgotten as he coordinated attacks on alien command ships with military precision that amazed even his own officers. The fake collapse had positioned human forces exactly where they needed to be. for maximum impact. Underground missile silos across North America opened their concealed doors and launched waves of advanced rockets at the alien motherships hovering over major cities. The missiles used new guidance systems that could track alien energy signatures and adjust their flight paths to hit moving targets. Years of secret research had produced weapons specifically designed to fight this enemy. Dr. Amanda Price watched the attack unfold from her laboratory and marveled at the scope of the deception she had helped to maintain. Her analysis of alien communications had been used to time the assault perfectly and target the most vulnerable ships first. The Korthax had revealed their weaknesses by being overconfident and dismissive of human capabilities. Colonel Steve Barnes led his armored division out of hidden underground garages where they had been waiting since the evacuation began. His tanks and artillery pieces had been positioned in a perfect circle around the alien landing sites while the enemy believed all human military equipment had been abandoned. The surprise was complete and devastating. The Korthic ships began falling from the sky as human weapons found their targets with deadly accuracy. Alien vessels that had seemed invincible just minutes before exploded in brilliant flashes of light, or crashed into empty fields where evacuated civilians would have been. The careful positioning of human forces meant that every shot counted and collateral damage was minimal. Technical Sergeant Carroll Johnson's communications team coordinated the assault with precision that impressed even the most experienced military observers. Hidden relay stations maintained contact between forces around the globe while jamming alien communications. The Korthax could not coordinate their response or call for reinforcements from their home fleet. President Martha Stevens appeared on television again, but this time her message was very different from her earlier surrender speech. She stood confidently behind the presidential podium and explained to the world how humanity's greatest weapon had been the ability to deceive and outthink their enemies. The apparent paralysis by fear had been the greatest military performance in history. Admiral Zethkar tried desperately to rally his scattered fleet but found that human attacks were coming from every direction at once. His ships were designed to fight enemies in space, not hidden forces emerging from underground positions. The Korthic weapons could not target enemies they could not see, and their sensors had been fooled by the human deception. Fighter jets emerged from mountain caves and attacked alien ships with weapons that used the enemy's own energy against them. Human pilots had trained for months in secret, using captured alien technology to develop new tactics. The jets moved in perfect formation and struck with precision that left the alien pilots confused and overwhelmed. Naval forces that had appeared to flee revealed themselves from hidden positions along coastlines and launched coordinated attacks on alien ships over water. Human submarines surfaced simultaneously around the globe and fired specialized torpedoes that could travel through atmosphere as well as water. The aliens had never encountered such versatile weapons. The space battle intensified as more human ships appeared from their hiding places throughout the solar system. Jake Morrison's fleet had been positioned to cut off alien escape routes while ground forces destroyed the ships in orbit. The Korthax found themselves trapped between attacks from above and below with no way to retreat or regroup. Cities that had appeared empty and defenseless suddenly bristled with defensive systems that emerged from buildings and parks. Alien landing parties found themselves surrounded by human forces that had been hiding in plain sight. The civilians who had seemed to flee in panic were actually trained militia members who knew the terrain perfectly. The coordinated assault continued for hours as human forces pressed their advantage against the confused and disorganized alien fleet. Ships that had dominated Earth's skies were now burning wrecks falling toward the planet's surface. The Korthic Empire's most powerful fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had completely underestimated. General Cooper received reports of successful strikes from every theater of operation as the human counterattack exceeded all expectations. The aliens had positioned themselves exactly where the attack plan needed them to be, and their overconfidence had made them careless. The greatest military deception in history was becoming the greatest military victory. Admiral Zethkar finally understood that he had been completely outmaneuvered by an enemy he had thought was primitive and weak. the human paralysis by fear, had been an elaborate trap, and his fleet had walked directly into it. He gave the order to retreat, but found that most of his ships were already destroyed or too damaged to escape Earth's gravity. The battle ended faster than anyone had expected. Within 6 hours of the first human attack, most of the alien fleet was either destroyed or captured. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the last Korthik vessels limping away from Earth's orbit. The few ships that could still fly were badly damaged and posed no threat to anyone. The invasion was over and humanity had won. Admiral Zethkar sat in a human detention cell aboard his own flagship, which was now under enemy control. The proud Korthik commander, who had expected an easy conquest, found himself a prisoner of the species he had thought was weak and cowardly. His ship's systems had been taken over by human technicians who understood alien technology better than he had imagined possible. President Martha Stevens addressed the world from the White House with a confident smile that was very different from her earlier surrender speech. She explained how Operation Trojan Horse had been the greatest deception in military history and thanked the brave men and women who had played their parts perfectly. The president revealed that humanity's apparent weakness had been carefully planned and executed. The world watched in amazement as the truth about the past 3 days was revealed. Every act of panic and every military retreat had been part of an elaborate plan to make the aliens overconfident. Millions of people had unknowingly participated in the deception by following evacuation routes that positioned them to support the military operation when the time came. Dr. Amanda Price interrogated captured Korthik officers in a secure facility and learned disturbing information about alien conquest methods. The Korthiks had conquered dozens of worlds by using fear and intimidation rather than superior military force. Most species they encountered actually were paralyzed by terror and surrendered without fighting back effectively. The alien prisoners explained that the Korthik Empire relied on psychological warfare to win battles before they started. Their massive ships and threatening broadcasts were designed to break enemy morale and convince civilizations to surrender rather than face destruction. The strategy had worked on every world they had encountered until they met humanity. General Ryan Cooper reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction and pride in his forces. The coordinated attack had succeeded beyond all expectations and proved that human ingenuity could overcome superior technology. The general's fake surrender speech had been one of the most difficult performances of his military career, but it had been essential to the plan's success. Captain Lisa Rodriguez coordinated the cleanup operations as human forces, secured captured alien vessels, and rescued any survivors from crashed ships. Her teams worked carefully to preserve alien technology for study while ensuring that no enemy forces remained active on Earth. The planet was finally safe from the invasion threat. The captured alien technology provided humanity with scientific advances that would have taken decades to develop independently. Human engineers studied Korthik energy weapons and shield systems while learning how to build faster-than-light communication devices. The failed invasion had accidentally given Earth access to advanced technology from across the galaxy. Colonel Steve Barnes led the investigation teams that examined alien equipment and databases for information about the Korthik Empire. The data revealed that Earth was not the first world to resist successfully, but it was the first to use deception as the primary weapon. Other species had fought bravely, but none had thought to pretend weakness while preparing strength. Lieutenant Commander Don Foster became a hero for leading the subway tunnel attacks that started the human counteroffensive. His coordination of hidden weapon systems beneath New York City had been crucial to the plan's success. Don received commendations from world leaders but insisted that every person who participated in the deception deserved equal credit. The alien prisoners provided maps and information about other Korthik targets throughout the galaxy. Humanity learned that dozens of civilizations were currently under alien occupation and many more were scheduled for conquest. The information gave Earth's leaders difficult decisions about whether to help other species fight for their freedom. Admiral Zethkar finally agreed to be interviewed by human representatives after weeks of refusing to cooperate. The defeated alien commander admitted that he had never encountered a species capable of such elaborate deception. The Korthax had studied human behavior but completely misunderstood humanity's capacity for strategic thinking and coordination under pressure. The former admiral explained that most species showed their true capabilities when threatened with extinction. Humans were unique in their ability to hide their strength while appearing weak and helpless. This talent for deception had never been encountered by the Korthak Empire, and their intelligence services had no defense against it, Dr. Price published her analysis of human behavior during the crisis and explained how millions of people had instinctively followed the evacuation plans even without knowing the full strategy. The study showed that humanity's greatest strength was the ability to work together toward common goals even under extreme stress and uncertainty. Commander Morrison received command of the first human starship built using captured alien technology. His mission was to explore the galaxy and make contact with other species that might be fighting against Korthak occupation. Earth would no longer hide from the universe but would take an active role in galactic affairs. The revelation of humanity's deception sent shockwaves through the Korthak Empire as news of the defeat reached their homeworlds. Other alien species learned that the supposedly invincible Korthak fleet had been destroyed by a civilization they had dismissed as primitive. The Empire's reputation for easy conquests was shattered forever. President Stevens announced that Earth would share its defensive strategies with any species threatened by alien invasion. The deception tactics that had saved humanity could be adapted to help other civilizations resist conquest. The planet that had seemed paralyzed by fear would become a beacon of hope for freedom throughout the galaxy. Technical Sergeant Carol Johnson became the head of a new communication network that connected Earth with resistance movements on occupied worlds. Her team used captured alien technology to send messages of hope and tactical advice to species fighting for their independence. The network grew stronger each day as more civilizations joined the fight, the final scene showed. Admiral Zethkar in his cell warning his human guards that other alien empires would learn from the Korthak failure and develop new strategies. The defeated commander predicted that future invasions would be more careful and harder to deceive. General Cooper simply smiled and replied that humanity would be ready for whatever came next because Earth's greatest weapon was the ability to adapt and surprise their enemies. The invasion that was supposed to be humanity's end had instead become the beginning of Earth's role as a major power in galactic politics. The species that had appeared weak and frightened had proven that intelligence and determination could overcome any advantage in technology or numbers.